Good morning, Dan and Amy. So here's what we know this morning at this point about that Manchester terrorist attack at the Ariana Grande concert that killed 22, wounded 59 at last report. We know that police believe it was a terrorist attack, that ISIS has claimed credit, that the police believe they know who the suicide bomber was, although they have not disclosed his name or any information about him.
And that's new news within the hour that they came forward saying that they've dealt with him before.
And that there was another man arrested this morning at a shopping mall, but Greater Manchester Police said that his arrest, despite evacuating the mall, had nothing to do with last night's attack. So that's a bit curious, but we don't have more details. That I've heard.
The 23-year-old man that was arrested was wearing combat boots up to his knees, camouflage, and a black T-shirt.
Well, you have British tabloids reporting, assuming from British intelligence or law enforcement agencies, that the Brits have 400 known nationals who left Britain to fight for ISIS in Syria and Iraq as a part of a universe of 3,500 suspected terrorists in the country. And you have President Trump over the weekend in Saudi Arabia saying this about radical Islamic terrorists.
If you choose the path of terror, your life will be empty, your life will be brief, and your soul will be fully condemned. And political leaders must speak out to affirm the same idea. Heroes don't kill innocents, they save them.
Yeah, wasn't getting too many amens from the assembled crowd in Saudi Arabia, but he added to those very tough words in response to the attack last night.
Yeah, and he has a new name for terrorists.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name. I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers. And we'll have more of them. But they're losers. Just remember that.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Khalil Marrar, a counterterrorism expert, professor and researcher of public policy, administration, and Middle East politics at Governor State University. Khalil, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy.
So last night's terrorist attack, believed to be a terrorist attack. Again, ISIS claiming credit for it this morning. How should the West and the President of the United States respond, and what was your assessment of Trump's response?
You know, there's a short-term answer, Dan, and a long-term answer as these things go. The short-term answer is to have better law enforcement, and by that I mean more resources. I mean, if there's one thing that the UK police were complaining about, it's that they don't have enough resources to interdict those numbers that you're talking about, which are only the tip of the iceberg. The 400, potential combatants that were in Syria or Iraq fighting with ISIS, and then the 3,500, and that's only the people that are known to law enforcement. So better law enforcement in the short term, more resources to interdict would-be attackers like the one last night. The long-term answer really speaks to the nature of the attack that took place on that arena. This is not a, quote-unquote lone wolf attack, a term that I've told you before I don't really care for.
Mm-hmm.
This is one that is planned out, that is executed with precision to maximize terror, and you don't just go out and get explosives, ball bearings, and other things to make an IED just on the spur of the moment. You have to have planning, and you have to have a command and control center to actually set into motion that operation.
And he cased out the joint, I'm sure, beforehand to have maximum casualties. But do you think, obviously ISIS is claiming responsibility. Do you think he acted alone?
It's absolutely certain that this person could not have acted alone. ISIS will take responsibility because that's what ISIS does. Even with people who are considered to be lone wolves and using what I've called in the past the implements of the everyday, think pressure cookers, knives, and so on. The knife attack, for example, not too long ago on the UK, being an example. But this really, Amy, this is a good question that you're asking. It really speaks to the long term. The long term is that we have to deal with ISIS, and not just ISIS, the organization that is fighting us on the ground, that is destroying regimes in the Middle East, that is destroying whole countries in the Middle East. We have to deal with ISIS's ideology. There's a radicalization element there that we need to address that goes beyond law enforcement.
Well, Trump's National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, on the Sunday shows talked about the need for Islamic republics to defund terrorist organizations. Also talked about getting into madrasas and mosques that have been radicalized by the leadership of those institutions. And there's some tracking that's done in this country as well of radical clerics in some mosques, a small percentage of the number of mosques in this country, but nevertheless, same thing with madrasas. Is that something that is appropriate and where law enforcement should perhaps be more aggressive in the use of its resources?
Look, I mean, here's the thing. The UK police, the UK law enforcement establishment has been doing this for years, definitely since 7/7 in 2005, and for sure since 9/11, and for a long time before that. The issue, absolutely, you're right. You're rightly pointing out to the short term that the issue is a law enforcement interdiction. So, yeah, close down madrasas, monitor them, survey them, monitor individuals. But that's really pulling needles out of a haystack, as the old saying goes. I think the longer term picture is very essential here, and that is that we need to basically, first and foremost, intermediate, not even long term, intermediate, have a consistent strategy. Take, for example, Donald Trump visiting Saudi Arabia, the first country that he visited on his global tour. Saudi Arabia and the Saudi regime and the Saudi establishment, the religious establishment, the Wahhabis, are responsible for a great deal, if not almost entirely, the madrasa phenomenon that we've been seeing since the war in Afghanistan in '79. So we can't be talking out of both sides of our mouth, and we have to be consistent in our foreign policy approach and take a stand. Basically admonishes the Saudi government for doing exactly what you're talking about, educating and really socializing about, this ideology of terror, this extremist ideology of terrorism, Islamic terrorism. The long-term answer is one that tackles the ideology. And by ideology, I mean we have to look at the strand, a very rabid, a very virulent strand of Islam that makes people go out and attack a group of girls, mostly, who are watching the Ariana Grande concert. I mean, listen, there's nothing in Islam that justifies the killing of a 7-year-old, 8-year-old girl. And it's heartbreaking that a lot of people died last night.
Yeah, but it's a new target. I mean, it's a new target audience, the younger kids here.
It's not a new target.
Well, should we have an American pop singer singing to a sold-out crowd? They knew that the kids were there. They're innocent, pink balloons because she had a balloon drop in the last song of her concert, and it scares me that this is going to be the new normal, and that if it happens in the UK, of course, it could happen here in America.
And Dan is right in the sense that it's not a new target, but you're absolutely right in the sense that this is a very high-value target. And this is one where, usually terrorists don't discriminate whether there's children there. This is one that willfully, maliciously, and intentionally, and I think you're right in that respect, targeted a group of girls, a group of women and children that basically are watching this concert. It's truly an attack on our values. And as you point out, it's an American singer, so the value of that should not be lost on us here in America.
We're learning
not too far away from us.
We're learning now that 2 of the 22 victims, one's an 18-year-old that we talked about before who was a super fan of Ariana Grande, but an 8-year-old has died as well. And that's, we're slowly learning the names of these victims.
Yeah, well,
devastating.
Yeah, and when they behead the children of Coptic Christians, I mean, this is not new. Those lives matter too, and they're just as valuable as the lives of Westerners. I mean, I understand that we treat these things differently and they strike home differently, but let's just remember who we're dealing with here and that this is nothing new. And I guess the challenge too, Khalil, the geopolitical challenge is I hear what you're saying about Saudi Arabia, and I don't disagree. But you've got the balance of power in the region that was tipped towards Iran under the previous regime, and trying to kind of reestablish this binary stability. I mean, this duality in the region between two powers that struggle for hegemonies, the Saudis and the Iranians. And then we're also trying to do things like work with the Saudis to take out the Houthis in Yemen. And so it's just complicated because, where are our allies of permanence that actually do have shared values? I don't see them outside of Israel.
And that's actually a keen observation, is that we need to have a consistent strategy. And one that, I don't disagree with regional balancing, but I really loathe the idea of regional balancing that basically involves making everybody an enemy. Iran being a Shiite state, a theocratic state, Saudi Arabia being a theocratic Sunni state, and we're sort of alienating Iran, befriending Iran, alienating Saudi Arabia, befriending Saudi Arabia. Now, granted, these are two different administrations, but, that fine distinction is not made in that region. And you're right to point out that we need more allies. Israel being one, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, President Trump was praising today. The Egyptian authorities, even though I disagree with the Egyptian regime wholly, but the Egyptian authorities being another, Tunisia, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, we do have a considerable amount of potential there that we need to tap into. I totally agree with you, Dan.
All right, we're not going to solve this, but it's a worthwhile conversation, Khalil, and appreciate your insights as always. Khalil Marrar, terrorism expert, professor researcher of public policy administration and Middle East politics at Governor State University. Khalil, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.